It's another beautiful Wednesday in October, another Wednesday to talk about women and bring to the fore the issues that are obviously affecting women. Welcome to the Women series, where we capture developments and stories that impact women. My name is Ayomide, and of course, I am your very host. It is still the Mental Health Month, and the focus for the month or the day is mental health care for all. Let's make it a reality. Now, the big question I've been ruminating about in my mind is, collectively as a nation and globally, how do we achieve this? Now, before we go on, allow me to provide you with this information. According to the World Health Organization, Nigeria has been reported to having one of the highest case loads of depression and ranks 15th in the frequency of suicide in the world, and that's just one case of mental health illness. Less of mental health care facilities and poor societal attitudes towards the mental illness. With all of this in perspective, how do we make mental health a reality in our society, especially as it affects women? With me today to answer all of these questions and to help clarify issues around mental health is a mental health professional and an executive director of She Writes Women, Hawa Ojeifo. Hello, Hawa. It's so great to be speaking with you and such an honor to have you on the Women Series program today. How are you doing?
I'm very well. Thank you so much, Ayomide, for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak about something that's really passionate.
Yes. So just before we go into today's conversation, I was speaking to someone in the studio earlier today, and I was trying to describe you, and I mentioned that, oh, I'll be speaking with Howard today, the lady that got awarded by the Queen, and she's like, how much of a big deal was that? So how much of a big deal was that to you?
It was most certainly a very big deal. It is one of the major things in the early part of my career. It hasn't been a very long career in mental health, actually. It's just been 5 years, but it came very early on. And I believe it was layers of validation of the work that we do at She Writes Woman, of my story and using my story to advocate for the rights of, people with mental health conditions, and just generally really meant a lot to me. I think until the point where I was right in front of the Queen, it had not yet hit me, the gravity and the magnitude of what an honor it really was. So yeah, it was great.
Yeah. Oh, very interesting. And I must say, well done to all the good works you're doing in respect to mental health. We see you, we appreciate you, and of course, we look forward to so many opportunities coming up. So let's go quickly into today's conversation. Now, you'd agree with me that there has been some level of awareness around mental health in recent times, with a central message on mental wellness, right? So how important would you describe the state of mental health of a person? I think to put that into perspective, how important is the state of mental health of a person?
It's absolutely very important, whilst we, quote the World Health Organization and all the amazing statistics that are very compelling. I think it's very fundamental for us to recognize that mental health is really about three core components and how those components affect how we show up in different aspects of our lives. So it's about our thoughts, it's about our feelings, the interaction between our thoughts and feelings and how that influences our behavior. And then this behavior that we have, either in totality or as it expresses in different areas of our lives, that is what affects us and how we interact with work, with our family, interpersonal relationships, and things like that. So your mental health is really at the core of who you are and how you take on several roles within a society, whether that role is being an employee or being an employer or being a mother or a father or a daughter or a wife or husband or whatever that is. Your mental health, how you think, the thoughts that go through your mind, how you process it, the emotions that those thoughts trigger, and then how that translates into behavior is really at the totality of who we are, whether individually or collectively. So it is important that whenever we talk about wellness or health, we cannot fully have that conversation until we really go to the core and the foundation of how we express as human beings, which really comes from our mental health.
Very interesting. I mean, one other important aspect of life that has affected and is still affecting people, both male and female, men and women, boy, girl, is the work-life balance. You have spoken about your own story. I've heard you say things related to how your work-life balance affected your mental health. Now, some people wear in stress like a badge of honor and unconsciously get soaked in their work stress. So what then is the place of mental health while chasing success and passion? I say this because a lot of people are very much in tune with their success and passion nowadays, and then they forget about the mental implication on their self. So what is the place of the mental health while striving for success and pursuing your passion?
I believe that's a very amazing question, and it's one that perhaps we all need to begin to answer on several levels. On the one hand, when we talk about work-life balance, it's very important to know what do we, whether individually or whatever school you belong to, what do you consider as balance? Do you mean balance as in 50-50? There can be 90-10, there can be 80-20, there can be 40-60, as long as no one goes to zero. So that's very important. More than anything, many parts of the world are beginning to recognize the new concept work-life integration as against the balance, which a lot of times, I mean, a lot of studies and research and work-life balance and how it is, almost unattainable. It's this very amazing, tagline, but does it really translate into real life? So that's on the one hand. On the other hand, is recognizing that, of course, we have personal responsibility on an individual level to influence our outcomes, whether that is in our thoughts or our emotions, our behavior, in how we become conscious and intentionally, deliberately address our mental health or create a life that is healthy for us. Whether that is physically or mentally or any other aspect of wellness. And then on the third hand, there is something that I always say, we cannot self-care our way out of a mentally unhealthy environment. The truth is that people will always be limited. And I mean this by the average, maybe the average citizen, for example, in Nigeria, will always be limited by the social, economic, and political influences within the environment. So, for example, the poverty rate, the economic, whether it's inflation, whether it's how the macroeconomy is doing or the microeconomy, you cannot tell people that, oh, these things are happening, but you know what, just breathe, I'll just meditate and everything is going to be fine. Of course, you have personal responsibility in ensuring that you can build emotional resilience, and ensuring that you somewhat have some level of elasticity so that when these stressors come, they can stretch you but not break you. But on the other hand, we need to also shine a greater light on the fact that the system causes people to overwork. The system causes people to burn out. So whether that system is a company or an organization, or whether that's a larger system in terms of Nigeria, we need to rethink the implication and the consequences of certain socioeconomic, political, and maybe organizational, policies, procedures, processes that could potentially affect how people address their mental health. So yes, we want to tell people to take responsibility in how you sleep, or where you work, or how you interact with people, what you consume, whether that is from the edible perspective or non-edible things like the music, the movies, and all of those things that you take in the news as well. We also want to tell people, okay, do your exercise, make sure you go in for routine mental health checks and things like that. But then we recognize that even after you do all of that and you get stuck in traffic for 4 to 5 hours, or there are gunshots near your house, or that, there are members of the government that are harassing you, or, electricity companies come and, disturb you. Those things are also determinants in your mental health outcomes, whether on an individual level or on a collective level.
Mm, very interesting. No, one other question relating to the work life, which of course is the workplace itself. And I feel like most women they are victims of this in terms of workplace harassment. So workplace harassment for women is another factor that has been identified to affecting the productivity of women and invariably their mental health. For women who have found themselves in such situation, now two questions. What do you think they can do to help themselves? And to people that are inflicting such pain on women, what exactly is the implication of their actions?
I mean, on the one hand, it's very important. I mean, this is such a sensitive topic because 7 in 10 of the women who have made contact with us as She Writes Woman organization have had one sexual violence experience or the other. Part of those sexual violence experiences are workplace related. And so it's so sensitive, but I also think that we're at a time where we no longer want to tell women to protect themselves. We no longer want to tell women that, oh, what can you do so that you can avoid this or you can navigate this. I think now we should be having a much larger conversation as to what is it about the workplace culture and the conventional workplace culture or environment that allows for these kinds of harassments to take place without repercussion. I believe that the culture of impunity is something that filters very deeply into workplace, the conventional workplace culture, whether that's in the financial industries or, in tech and other aspects as well, FMCGs and all. I believe that it's important for organizations to co-create and ensure that, women's voices are included in the kinds of policies and processes they're making so that it is reflective of the true interest of a lot of women in the workplace, but also on some of the fears and the hindrances to how women interact with workplaces. We do know for a fact that a lot of women who've had encounters with regards to workplace sexual violence or, some other minor microaggressions have left the workplace. And it goes against the fact that we are trying to push for more women to get to certain aspects of workplaces and industries and things like that. So if we do not begin to actually create safe places for women within these organizations, then we by default are perpetuating and turning a blind eye as bystanders really in women's participation within the workplace or women getting back into the workforce or growing within the ranks of the workplace. So I do believe it's a more holistic thing. I believe that women in management levels have a lot of work to do, but it's also recognizing that one woman in management cannot shoulder the entire experience of women within any organization. We need to deliberately, and that's the thing, all of these are interconnected, because if you do not deliberately try to ensure that more women at managerial level in the C-suite and at decision-making tables, then decisions and policies and processes are not reflective of women's needs. And so when those needs and the opportunities come for those needs to be met, it's hard for them to meet those needs. It's hard for any organization to meet those needs. In fact, many organizations then tend to be complicit in ways that they are unaware. We have to broaden that to include all people with the workplace, to not just waiting for issues to arise, but to proactively begin to create workplaces that are very safe for women to work in.
Safe place was one key word I could identify from what you just said now. We need to start thinking of safe places for women in the conventional work-life setting. Now let's move to personal finances, which of course a lot of people have identified as a trigger for mental health. Now, how can people be very much aware of their finances with respect to their mental health?
I think that's a very question. Indeed, financial stresses are a huge of mental health issues that people are dealing with, psychosocial issues, some shocks, economic shocks within the environment and things like that, especially since the pandemic. There's been loss of jobs, health bills, loss, grief, and inflation. You have more money, you're buying less things. Imagine if you've lost your job, things like that. And so people are having to think about their lives and their survival more than anything. And if you look at it from the hierarchy of needs, at the very bottom, if you haven't met things like food, shelter, clothing, you cannot begin to tell people to aspire, to tell people to have visions and purpose and all of that when they don't have food in their stomach, or maybe their finances are not in order. So it's very important. And that's why we always say mental health is a public health concern. It's because, it's not just about, the individual level or how we interact, how everything within the economy, the public care can affect or be affected by mental health. And as such, we see a lot of, and again, on an individual level, we tell a lot of people, do a lot of financial planning, make sure you plan for shocks, emergency funds, important to have a good job and things like that. But again, the system where it is less probable for everybody to have jobs that they truly desire, where there are no social, safety nets for people people, there are the social welfare is a problem. How many people have insurances to cover a lot of things? How many people are getting, checks from the government to sustain them, especially with the pandemic and everything like that? We all saw how many of our leaders looted funds and looted, COVID-19 in, food packs and things that were meant for the masses. So of course people would worry. And I think on some extent it might be insensitive for us to tell them, oh, you just need to like plan your finances better and things like that. The truth is that, and we need to recognize this, is Nigeria is the capital of the world. And we need to really sit with that sometimes, because what happens is that a lot of times we tend to choose anecdotes over facts. And so you look around you and you see that people are, oh yeah, they're average. That is a representation of the general. Okay, and people are really stressed about their livelihood, their money, and how it's going to affect them.
And now to the very last question, which of course is like the key to this discussion, which is making it a reality. Now you have used your platform and voice to speak about mental health. Beyond the awareness is seeking help. Now with respect to your story now, how do people now become aware of their situation and now start looking for help?
Great. On the one hand, in order for you to be able to recognize certain signs within yourself or in other people, loved ones and things like that, you have to know what those signs are. And I like to tell people it's not just about dishing out symptoms and then all of a sudden you become this hyper aware person that is looking at everybody and be like, this one, I think she has this disorder and that thing, and all of that. I think it's very important for us to recognize what was our norm, prior to when you started having a certain thing. What is your norm, and recognizing that there's no this is who I am and things like that. It's not that. If it's not desirable, it is changeable. And if it's not desirable, it is also learned behavior from a long time. And so I mean, of course, there's the last part of it, that if it's not desirable, then sometimes it's either you that needs to change, or the environment in which you are that also needs to adapt to your needs and things like that. So I do believe that recognizing a person's norm is one thing, so that we recognize when there's been a deviation from that norm, so to speak, because a norm, or what we consider normal in the mental health space is not a point. It's a range of behavior and attitudes and beliefs and things like that, and that can vary from person to person. And when it crosses over, you're like, maybe there's something there for us to investigate and to look, more closely into. So of course, one of the things that I'll start with will be sleep. I always start with sleep because it kind of is a leveling ground. A lot of people struggle with sleep, whether that is getting enough sleep, whether that is falling asleep early, whether that is being able to sleep the whole night without actually breaking up your sleep, whether that is sleeping for 9 hours and still waking up feeling tired and fatigued and things like that. Your sleep can be a great indicator to the state of your mind, because when you do try to sleep, or when you are asleep, it's the subconscious part of your mind that really takes over, and so that can tell you a lot about how your day is going, or how the happenings of your daytime or your waking hours are affecting what is going on when you're trying to sleep. And so if you're having too much sleep or too little sleep, and you would know this because this is either affecting your day-to-day life, people around you are beginning to notice, or even you are beginning to, what is it? Small thing, I'll just sleep, things like that. Or I don't sleep, or 1 a.m., 2 a.m., I've been on the bed for 3 hours and I'm not able to sleep. And then when it's almost 4 o'clock, that's when I will now sleep. And then I can only get like 1 hour, 13 minutes before I get up and get dressed and go to work, and repeat the cycle over and over again. So too much sleep or too little sleep can be an indication that there is something there for you to begin to probe. Another thing is, I'm going to go to food. Eating habits, because that's another thing that's very, very common. Either you're eating too much, like you're having such a wild appetite all of a sudden, or you go a whole day and forget to eat, or and this is not a case of, I remember to eat but I didn't get the chance and I'm hungry, or this is, you're not even thinking about it. And a lot of times that's because your subconscious mind is saddled with a lot of problems. You're dealing with things that even on a conscious level, you think, oh no, I'm working, but then your mind is working through, your grandmother this, your mother that, or your baby that, and the school fees, and then they still have to travel, but this COVID, and all of those things are happening. So you're either eating a lot or you're eating very little. Another thing that can be very, very helpful to also look at would be your thoughts. I mean, your thoughts and how they're affecting your mood, really. Are you having general low mood these days? And that's not to say that you're always sad. It's just to say that you are in this very numb state, or in a state where nothing really spikes excitement in you at all. It's just yeah, and then everything is almost hitting a wall of some sort. And so we find that a lot of people who have very low mood for at least for most hours of the day, most days in a week, for at least 2 weeks and beyond, have something that have an indication of what could be depression, of course, combined with other signs that I've spoken about. Generally speaking, people will begin to have lethargy. This one is also very common. And lethargy is really, you have a lot of time on your hands. You're sleeping okay, but for some reason, you're still tired. During the day, you're tired, you do small work and you're yawning seriously. A lot of people experienced that during the pandemic, during the lockdown, rather. And we saw that even though people were working from home and had more time on their hands, they were less productive and they were actually a lot tired. And so people were like, what is going on? What is going on? And so those are indications as well. Of course, there are things with regards to withdrawing from social settings. All of a sudden, you don't want to people anymore. You don't want to go near people. You don't want to interact. You don't want to pick up your phone because you're like, I beg you. What is it? It's okay. You just want to cut off from everything. And you used to be the party starter, used to be the bubbler and the person that arranges for everybody to come together. But now you don't want to do that anymore. Those can be some indications of something that needs to be closely examined.
I have learned a lot from this conversation because I've also had my own fair share of experiencing one of these things you've pointed out. Now, how do we get help? I mean, is there a way one can reach out to you when it comes to when they have to deal with like personal questions and ask you and help, basically try to help them when it comes to their mental health?
Sure. I mean, awareness is one thing, but we have to move from awareness to action. So whether that action is about taking personal responsibility, like I said before, in reaching out to get support, we've been running a 24/7 toll-free helpline. And I would tell any single person that you don't even need to hesitate. This year alone, we've logged about 7,000 calls on our 24/7 helpline. And that's a lot because that's more than double of what we did last year, just to give you some perspective. That's more than 7,000 calls have gone in and out of our helpline. And the helpline is 0800 800 2000. 0800 800 2000. So that's 0800 800 2000. And it is a toll-free helpline, which means that you don't have to worry about your airtime or call credit. And it is confidential. You get to speak directly with a trained and licensed counselor who will put you through right there on the phone. And you can call the helpline as many times as you want to. You can DM us across social media. We're particularly very active on Instagram, but we're also on Twitter. You can DM us at She Writes Woman. That is SHEWRITES, then woman. And it is open to both, all genders are welcome. We just have a particular focus on women because women can indeed, and by statistics, can reduce the burden of mental health on any given population. So hopefully that is for personal responsibilities. For organizations, I would say that responsibility, it is also a right of employees to be able to have access to mental health care. And it's not just something that you put in the hands of employees. You also have to take responsibility for the way people show up to your workplace and how your work place is affecting how people show up in their own lives as well. So it is very important for organizations to also begin to take active steps in ensuring, protecting, and enhancing the mental health of their employees. And I don't just mean just getting one HMO plan that that does it, or doing a gym subscription. There is no more room for tokenism. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and people are at the tip and at the edge. It is important that we have holistic solutions that can reach people wherever they are, solutions that are sustainable and that can actually be resilient over a period of time. And so you can reach out to us as well for that.
Thank you very much for this. Thank you for putting this in perspective. And I would like to end by saying that your mental health is as important as your physical health. As much as you take care of your physical health, remember that your mental health is also there to be taken care of. And that brings us to the end of today's conversation. Thank you very much, Awa, for coming. It was great speaking with you. Thank you very much. It was great speaking with you.
Thank you so much for having me. I loved it.
On this note, we draw the curtains for today's episode. If you want to reach out to me, you can kindly send a mail to ayomide.okutoye@appreciate.com. Follow us on all our social media platforms showing on your screen. And to watch our videos and to read our stories, log on to www.appreciate.com to do that. And until next time, thank you for watching.